I got a magic kit when I was 6 years old. I was a big fan of David Copperfield. Do you know the difference between all the cards? There's 4 suits: clubs, spades, hearts, diamonds, ace to king. I just want you to think about one of those cards. Could you do that for me? So any communication that you have should be directed at one person, one solution, one problem that you're solving. The addiction to social media, it's the expectation of what's next, a reward. That's the exact structure you need to follow when you're just notice things. Be genuinely curious. What do you see in the background? What promise are you making to your customers? What promise are you making related to how you deliver your service? Why do you do what you do? Why are you passionate about it? Is this a long-term relationship that you're looking to have with your customer? If you try to speak to everybody, you're going to speak to no one. We failed to
Welcome to Amazing Exploits.
Well, thank you, Joshua. I'm happy to be here and looking forward to our conversation.
Starting from a career full-time as a magician, and then now in marketing, now the vice president, branding and communications at Thrive Agency. What has been your journey like?
Well, it has been an interesting journey, and some people scratch their head when I tell them that it started out being a magician. I got a magic kit when I was 6 years old, and I guess I liked the fact that it involved using your hands, and there was something that I knew that somebody else didn't know, and gave me an excuse to be in front of people. And during high school, I met a gentleman who worked at an advertising agency, and they were looking for an entertainer to promote their business using magic, and would I be interested? And I said, oh, sure. And so it's a global brand that we've all heard of, and that relationship lasted another 16 years. And through the course of that, I got to hang out at the advertising agency. That's what they were called back then. Now, it's more digital marketing agency, but I just thought it was a really cool career, that it involved communicating a message, influencing a decision for the good. There was a little bit of presentation and theater behind presenting your product or service. And then at the end, there was some ask of the audience to buy the product or purchase the service. And I thought, wow, that's very similar to the way a magic trick is structured. And so I basically started on this dual career path at that point, and was not only working at advertising agencies, but continuing to do magic shows. And they both sort of fed each other. And it was fun to be able to see the world of marketing through a performance and a magic lens. And yeah, so I've worked at a variety of agencies over my career. Thrive Internet Marketing Agency is a full-service digital marketing agency. We're probably larger than 95% of the agencies around the world. And I get to have fun every day helping clients perform magic for their customers.
That's beautiful and interesting. But what sparked your magic journey, right? Was it an exposure to a magician earlier on, and then what was your family expectations, right? Or their opinion of you even building a career in magic as at the time when you started?
That's a great question. Both of my parents are educators, and my younger brother is a lawyer and my older brother is an engineer. So I'm sort of this weird kid in the middle. And certainly there was an expectation that I would have a regular job. I think it probably goes back to, if there's something that interests you and something you're excited about, encourage that in someone. It doesn't have to be your kid. It could be your friend. It could be a relative. And they'll find their own path. And so intellectually, I knew that I had to support myself, and I had to have a place to live, and I had to eat, and all of those kind of things. And I think we read a lot about folks who try to control other people's activities, or maybe want their kids to go in a certain direction, and then the kid does that, and then later on they sort of go, I've had enough, I can't do this anymore. And end up going in their own direction. And so I was lucky enough to explore that and then be able to connect the dots to a career in something that is very similar.
Interesting.
Yeah, I would say there were a number of people that I interacted with along the way. I was a big fan of David Copperfield, who many of the audience probably has heard of. I mentioned there was a local club, and there were many older magicians in that club that taught me from a magic perspective. As I got older, I was invited to a training session in Montreal, Canada, that was conducted by a Broadway director who was also a magician. And so I think each step along the way, as long as you're inquisitive and curious and put in the time and the effort to practice and do what it requires for any type of endeavor, whether that be business endeavor or creative or artistic or whatever the case may be, I think teachers and mentors are going to show up because they genuinely want to help somebody else. And I think that's also happened in my business life, but you ask about the magic life. And yeah, I still keep in touch with many of those folks that helped me along the way. And my parents often in conversation with relatives or friends will bring up the fact that I'm a magician. And so they're not ashamed and they're not trying to hide that in the family closet, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, interesting. That's like a beautiful foundation you have, right, as a magician. And then you had mentioned earlier how you've sort of found that sweet spot, how your foundation as a magician, you're able to now impact and do cool stuff, even for clients and businesses. Can you share any real-time story of how your roots as a magician has shaped your approach to even helping a client or helping a company, yeah, captivate their audience?
If we look at a traditional magic trick, there are really three phases to it. And I'll just use a simple card trick. I think we're probably all familiar with a deck of cards. And so the magician may come out on stage and greet the audience with a smile and maybe look around and go, "Oh, this gentleman in the front row, what's your name?" And you'll say Joshua, and I'll go, "Well, that's a really nice shirt you have on. I love the way that fits. And do you have a deck of cards at home?" "Oh, yeah." "Do you know the difference between all the cards? There's four suits, clubs, spades, hearts, diamonds. And, there's ace to king. And I just want you to think about one of those cards. Could you do that for me?" And so you would respond, "Yes." And so then I would sort of talk you through whatever the plot of the magic trick is. And that sort of causes the audiences to lean in, right? They're like, "What's he going to do? What's going on?" And so at some point, I have to get to the climax of the trick and reveal the card that you're thinking of, or maybe I mess up and I don't reveal the card, and there's something that happens after that where I end up finally revealing. And so there might be a failure to begin with, and then there might be a revelation a little down the road. And so if we just break that down into the three stages, the first one is a connection, right? So I have to establish a connection.
Okay.
And so if I walk out on stage, there might be 100 people in the audience. And I can look at that audience as if they were 100 people, or I could look at that audience as if they were 100 individual people. And so I made the decision that I want to connect with you, Joshua.
Yeah.
And so what happens when I do that is the rest of the audience is like, "Oh, that's nice. He's actually being a human and he's having this conversation." And so everybody else in the audience is like, "Oh, well, if he points to me, I'm not going to be scared. He seems like a nice person," right?
Yeah.
And so we have to establish that credibility and that connection. The next thing that happens is I need to elicit some curiosity. And so that curiosity now causes people, and I mentioned it before, to kind of lean in. Like they're thinking in their head, "What's he going to do?" Usually a magician will have somebody pick a card, but I've asked you to think about a card, right? So that's a little bit different. It sort of jolts your awareness of like, "Oh, okay, well, I'm going to watch everything he does." And then I can keep that going for a little while, but if I take that too long, then the audience gets distracted or they get bored. And so you kind of have to know when is the right point to bring it to a climax. And then when I bring it to a climax, then everybody's like, oh, wow, that's amazing. And so there are these three phases. Now, the first phase, even though I'm just having a conversation with you, Joshua, the rest of the audience is sort of saturated in this oxytocin because it's a good experience. And so I've opened the door to now take it to the next phase, which is the curiosity phase. And that's a release of dopamine. And I know we've heard about dopamine with social media addiction, and it's really not the addiction to social media. It's the expectation of what's next, a reward, right? And so when we post something on social media, we're expecting somebody to like it, somebody to comment, somebody to share, right?
Yeah.
And in that curiosity phase, we're sort of amped up and there's like this sort of electricity and we're excited. But if you stay in that state too long, it can wear you out. And so now we've got to bring it to the last phase, which I call the conversion or the climax of the trick, which is a release of serotonin. And that release of serotonin is that neurotransmitter that floods your body with, oh, wow, this is awesome. Everything is right with the world. I totally understand now. And so if you look at that structure, that's the exact structure you need to follow when you're talking about marketing. And it doesn't matter if it's a social media post, if it's a blog post, if it's a how you answer the phone in your business, whether it's how you engage in a sales conversation in person or over Zoom. And so yeah, I would say that's the connection point and that's the structure. And I think we've all sort of experienced where somebody fakes the connection and they assume that they've made that connection and then they immediately jump to try to sell you something. And that actually backfires. And if you don't go through all of these phases, you've not only disrupted the ability to make the sale, you've probably made somebody disturbed enough that they're going to reject any future interactions with you or your company.
Yeah, very important. The connection aspect and then going on to curiosity and then conversion. I think that's just as you mentioned, a lot of times people want to just go straight to the sale. And once the connection is not there, most times they either don't make the sale at all. For small business owners that want to market properly, that want to create content that converts, content that connects to their audiences for them to eventually make the sale. What strategy should they use, or how can they learn how to market properly, still following these 3 steps that you've also shared with us?
One strategy that small businesses can use, which they have a great advantage because they should know their ideal customer as if they were going out for a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, right? Once you have that meeting, whether it's in person or over the computer screen, just notice things. Be genuinely curious. What do you see in the background if you're on a Zoom call or any other platform? If you're meeting them in person, how do they dress? Does it look like they have some new shoes? Be curious about, maybe ask them what they've been up to that day. And, the thing that people like talking about the most is themselves. And so that's a great way to make a connection. And so, I think we mentioned Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yeah.
That's got some great principles in there. And if you just had that book as a handbook, you would be doing better than 99% of everybody else out there. And so then once you feel like there's a connection and things are going well and you can see a smile in the other person, then you can move into that curiosity and just ask them, are there any challenges that you're having right now? Why are we having this meeting? And again, start to ask those questions. And then when you feel like you have got something that you want to proceed with, I think the next question you can ask is, what if? And so what if brings in that curiosity component, right? And so whatever that challenge might be, say, what if that challenge could go away tomorrow? And now that person is thinking, well, I've never thought of it that way. That's amazing. What do you mean by that? And so it's activating their imagination. It's making them curious. It's causing them to be very engaged in the conversation. Now, don't be thinking ahead of time that you're going to make this sale. Maybe you're not the right person to help them. Maybe you know somebody that could help them and that would serve that customer better. As soon as you figure that out, now it's time to go to the conversion. And it may just be, maybe we should set a longer meeting for next week, or present your offer, or describe your value proposition, or whatever that call to action you want to provide that person is. I think that's the next stage. And so it doesn't have to be difficult. It doesn't have to feel unnatural. It doesn't have to feel like you're pushy. But if you just have these 3 stages in your mind, then I think it makes that a much more pleasant and profitable experience for both parties. And so that's if you have a one-on-one connection with somebody, if you're meeting with them online, if you're meeting with them in person. If you are trying to figure out what to say about your business or what's unique about your business, I have a little framework that people can remember. It involves your hand. And so we'll start with the pinky. I don't know if they do this all around the world, but in the United States, we grew up making a pinky promise. And so you would interlock pinkies with someone on the playground and say, I pinky promise to do this. And you had to do whatever it was, and you didn't want to break that promise. So what promise are you making to your customers? What promise are you making related to how you deliver your service? What promise are you making if you are manufacturing something with the selection of the raw materials, right? What promise are you making to your team to give them an environment that's a great culture? The next one is the ring finger. In the United States, we wear our wedding band on the ring finger. You may think that's about a promise, but it's actually about relationship and the passion involved in the work that you do. Why do you do what you do? Why are you passionate about it? Is this a long-term relationship that you're looking to have with your customer? What about that relationship you have with your suppliers and your team? So think about that. And that gives you a lot of things that you could talk about that would give clues to what your business is all about. The next is the middle finger. And again, I don't know if this is a cultural reference that would translate, but in the United States, it's considered sometimes a vulgar symbol if you stick your middle finger up at somebody.
Absolutely.
It's actually a symbol of defiance, right? And so who's the villain? Who do you stand in defiance against? If you really believe your product or service is right for your customer, you've got to name that villain, right? It could be a person, it could be a business, it could be an ideology. The next one is the pointy finger. And the pointy finger is just that. It points to somebody. If you don't know who you're talking to, how are you going to talk to them? And so you have to know exactly who you're talking to. And then it also can beckon someone in, right? So you do that motion of come here. And so you're inviting them into your world or into your brand. It's also the symbol for number 1, that singular point of focus. So any communication that you have, whether it be a landing page, a blog, a sales conversation, should be directed at one person with one solution and one problem that you're solving. The next one is the thumbs up, which is the universal symbol for good. All right, everything's going well. Can you measure that everything is going well, right? The thumbs down is not so well. We've all seen the memes online about do this, don't do that. So related to your brand, what should people be doing or not doing? So you can talk about that. And then the thumb is also a thumbprint. What mark are you leaving on the world by doing what you do? What mark are you leaving on your customer by providing them an excellent product or service? And so I've just gone through 5 fingers, and there's probably 25 or 30 things that came out of that you could adapt to let people know about your business. And so I think when we're in this world of AI and we're expecting AI to know everything about us and our stories and our passions and our villains and our heartbreak, there's no way you could create a prompt that would mimic what I just went over in those 5 fingers. If you do that you are going to be way ahead of other brands that are relying on ChatGPT to do their content writing for them.
That's like very, very insightful. You also mentioned how we cannot outsource everything completely to artificial intelligence. I'd also love to know what you think. How are you using artificial intelligence currently? It's everywhere. There are a lot of corporations now that are just looking for ways to just integrate AI into their workflow, into their businesses to just like achieve results faster. So while on the other side, we also want to connect genuinely or authentically. So what should be the middle ground? What is the sweet spot of normal human connection and then working with artificial intelligence, both for small businesses and large brands? Hello, sorry for the break. I know you're enjoying the episode. Please, if you haven't subscribed, please just hit the subscribe button, click the like button, and also leave a comment. Share it to friends and family. It goes a long way to help the channel. You can get right back into the video.
So I think a lot of us think about artificial intelligence related to content production. We've seen all the videos online that are created by AI. There's all sorts of image generating tools. Of course, we're familiar with the text creation tools. And you're right. If you feed in a story, it can help you clean it up. It can help proofread it. It can make it more engaging, but it can't start with your bruises and scars that you've been through and your passion, right? And so if you put in 80% and you rely on AI to give you the 20% in a creative endeavor, that's human-guided AI. I think where we're seeing this next wave of efficiencies are repetitive tasks in business. It does a great job analyzing information and data. At Thrive, we use AI. We've created a custom little bot that will analyze sales conversations. We have really what we consider a 10 out of 10 gold standard for a sales conversation, and we record all of our sales calls and then run that through this special created bot that we have to give feedback and training to the sales team. The same thing with our customer service folks and our account managers who are interacting with the client. Who talked too much? The client should be talking more than us, right? And so using the tool like that to analyze it. If there are repetitive functions that are in your business that can save you a tremendous amount of time, that allows for more creative time and deep thinking time and more work on the business, right? Instead of getting mired up in things that are going on in the business. So I would say the efficiencies differ, but depending on what kind of business it is. And I would be looking beyond content creation for using AI for its best use cases and streamlining internal processes and operations.
Absolutely, I agree. Especially for repetitive tasks, but then the core work of the creative process, thinking deeply about our stories and knowing how to share them. I think that might be something that we really should not outsource to AI. I also love us to talk about content. A lot of times, marketing, you are working with content. You're either writing an article, creating a video.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that over your career journey, you've helped a lot of businesses, individuals get more result or more return on investment with content, with videos. So now in this present dispensation where we have a lot of distraction, our focus time has reduced significantly. People will just easily scroll past videos or ads or whatever does not interest them. What strategy are you using currently to help people get content or create content that actually converts?
I came up through the business when photo shoots and video shoots were very expensive parts of a marketing or advertising campaign. There were many people involved in those shoots and lots of expensive equipment and people helping make that brand look polished and clean and nice, right?
Yeah.
The platforms now are actually favoring content that is not polished, is very real and authentic. You know, if you look at statistics, and we'll just talk about maybe Instagram and TikTok because they're very heavy on video based. LinkedIn has sort of turned away from video at the present. It'll probably come back, but they're not pushing video as much. But the posts that get the most engagement on those platforms are shot on a phone. They're not shot with expensive equipment because we have a very smart audience. They know if something looks like an ad, and their brain starts to tune that stuff out. And we're all fighting. We talked about the thumb earlier. We're all fighting for that thumb to stop. And user-generated content, that might be an interview with, in just a short testimonial, the owner stepping out from behind the logo and engaging with an audience, not sitting behind a desk, but in an area that people are curious about. Remember, eliciting that curiosity. If you're a local business and you are shooting video out in the community that you're in, what do you think people are doing? They're going, oh, I know where that person is standing. They're right down the street from me. Let me keep watching. Maybe I'll see something else I recognize, right?
Yeah.
If you are a product-oriented company and again, the pointy finger, if you know who your ideal client is and what they like to do, make sure some of those props are in the scene. So that person is looking around the corner going, oh, they're just like me. They have the same type of refreshments that I like. They have the same kind of furniture, whatever the case may be. And the more we keep it real, that's what's stopping the scroll. When we talk about connection, you have to make that connection in the first 3 seconds. So don't sit there and go, hey, how are you? My name is Joshua. You have to get straight to the point. What is that connection point? What are you doing to elicit curiosity so that they continue to look, right? So it's watch time, it's impressions, it's all of those things. So again, we have to deconstruct. If somebody doesn't know you from anybody, how are you going to make that happen as quickly and efficiently and authentically as you possibly can?
I think that's like absolutely gold. Creating content that is like very relatable, and the example you shared is like, it's really practical, right? People are watching. They would be lovely if they see something they can relate to. Might be your furniture, might be how you're even struggling, might be how you're doing excellently, might be your interactions, your friends, your sports, or the books you read. But once we can create content that is really relatable, then we can like catch their attention. There are big brands that are getting it right in terms of their content, their storytelling. Nike, for example, over the years, they are doing very great with storytelling. They're able to elicit emotions with people, and people like can buy their sneakers just because of what they feel whenever they see the ads, whenever they see the stories that they share. How can growing brands learn to tell their story better?
Yeah, and you mentioned Nike. Nike did start out with a lot of celebrities and sports figures that were representing their brand, and then they moved to the real person on the weekend trying to stay in shape in between raising a family and buying groceries and all of that, right? And so that's a reflection of their ideal customer, somebody who is navigating life but still wants to sweat, right? So I think we can see that. When you look at a big brand, there's a couple of things that go on. And I would say, we work with a lot of franchise companies, multi-location brands. A generic brand statement across a geographic area is less impactful than more specific messaging in the local areas where they reside. And so if they are a global brand and they have a presence, then you need to have a personality and a communication that fits with that local vibe. That does take a lot of money. So depending on where you are in your growth mode, don't try to conquer the world right out of the gate, right? So win one geographic area and then expand outside of that. That's actually how Thrive grew 20 years ago, is we started in the Dallas, Texas area, and then we mastered visibility in that area, and then we moved out of that area and then slowly we have awareness now after 20 years across the United States and globally, but you're going to diffuse your efforts if you try to go too wide too fast. The connection point is, again, goes back to that pointy finger. Who are you talking to? What do you know about them? If you try to speak to everybody, you're going to speak to no one.
Wow.
And so a brand is as much about attracting the people you want as it is about repelling the people that you don't want. And often, if you can stake your claim or plant your flag or be very clear about who you're for, that actually gathers your tribe around you and causes them to go, yes, this is what we're about. We all have common goals and common beliefs or a common point of view of the world. And you see this in music all the time. You see this in sports. Everybody wants to fight for the underdog. They follow their particular team. They have their players on that team. When in music, everybody wants to discover the new band. They get angry if that band goes mainstream, right? Because they want to protect that group of people surrounding that brand as sort of a private community, right? The more of that you can create, the more successful you're going to be in growing or expanding your brand. Now, that doesn't mean you have to commit to one group. There may be different subgroups that all have a different reason for following your brand. And, digital is amazing because you can not only target individual groups with your messaging on a paid platform, but you have places that there can be private groups within a brand that they can interact, encourage each other, all that type of thing. So I would say go about it in a strategic way. Don't just start throwing things around and see what sticks. You've got to have a plan, and then you've got to work that plan, and you've got to be focused and not spread yourself too thin.
Yeah, I'd love to dig in a bit deeper, right? We have loads of local brands. We've had explosion of African brands to the world. We've had Afrobeat fashion from Nigeria, from Africa. We've had some local fintech brands becoming very big, and they're extending to London here in the US. So with this explosion, what advice would you give to a startup brand that started in Nigeria or started in somewhere in Africa that wants to extend or wants to take their product or market their product to the US market, or just take their product globally? So what strategy should they use?
I would say, in the US, of course, we're the melting pot from cultures all over the world, and we are very open arms when it comes to appreciating the value that people from all over the world bring. So I would say, don't be afraid to celebrate your heritage and where you come from. And then also, it would be good to do some market research. And I typically say, don't have a focus group, but have individual interviews with perhaps business owners that you're trying to connect with, right? And so if it's a product or service, who is your market? Ask them for some time, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, and have some very intelligent questions like you're asking now. You've obviously done your homework. And so when somebody steps up and asks for help, and you can sense that they are smart and driven and they want to succeed, you're going to be successful in getting people to talk with you. And so one question that may come up is, how do you feel about hiring a business or buying a product from Nigeria? What are your preconceived notions about that? And you may have positive and negative responses, right?
Yeah.
And so the positive ones, celebrate and bake that into your brand. The negative ones, you're either going to be able to address, you're going to be able to fix, or you're not going to be able to fix. And so you should also be very forward about those preconceived notions that people may be feeling. You might have a frequently asked questions. It might be part of your first sales conversation. It may be described in your product details, whatever the case may be. We talked about connection. And so one point of connection could be, hey, Mr. Jones, have you ever met anybody from Nigeria? No, I haven't. Well, gee, I'll bet you think that A, B, C, D, E, F. Is that fair? Well, yeah, it might be. Well, how about if I told you that this is the reality and this is what's happening, and help educate? And that can be very endearing to identify things that somebody is thinking, because when you do that, the person goes, wow, how did they know I was thinking that? That's rapport. That is a huge point of connection. Now that gives you the permission to say, what if, remember that phrase, what if, that we talked about before?
Yeah.
What if I told you that the quality of our fintech solution far exceeds this other product, competitor, middle finger, at a fraction of the price and twice the customer service? What would you think about that? What? Are you serious? How is that possible? Well, this is how it's possible. Da, 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 da. I'm just making stuff up here on the fly.
Yeah.
But, when we talk about a fashion brand or clothing, is that fashion brand rich in heritage? Does it have symbolism? Does it relate to where that business owner wants to expand globally? Again, we go back to the underdog. Why wouldn't we champion an underdog? That's the classic story, right? In movies and TV and books. And could I be part of helping this underdog conquer this particular niche in the industry? So hopefully I've given enough that can take somebody down a path to feel proud of what they're doing and not be ashamed, and then also be inquisitive and seek advice and help.
So let's talk about your TEDx talk. You spoke about using personal talents to help others. How has this philosophy guided your career? And then what was a moment where your work has really made a real impact in somebody's business?
Yeah. So my TEDx talk is, and maybe you could provide the link in the show notes, but it's called You Have Magic Power, Use It for Good. And obviously it's the good magic power that is from the magic tricks that I do, and what I believe we all have skills and talents that come from gifts that we were given when we were born, and skills that we develop over the course of our life. And so it was really about a trip that my wife and I made to Rwanda. So speaking about the continent of Africa,
Yeah.
and my impressions about how that trip would go. And I was sort of wanted that trip to be all about me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what ended up happening, and I won't spoil it for those who want to watch the TEDx talk, but something that happened after a magic show that I performed in the United States connected the dots between our trip to Rwanda and something that I would have done for free. We were able to provide some money to help somebody, right? Halfway around the world. And so what clicked for me was we all have something that we're passionate about. It could be working in a spreadsheet. It could be baking a cake. If I go for a meeting at the corporate office of Thrive, I'm doing magic tricks, right?
Yeah.
If I'm doing a talk in front of a bunch of business executives, I'm doing a magic trick. And it's what I'm comfortable doing. It is something that I've enjoyed my whole life. So why wouldn't I do it? And so when we are unapologetic about that thing that we do that lights us up, that may or may not be related to your job,
Yeah.
I believe it's our responsibility to share that with somebody, because passion is infectious. And when you share that, it lights other people up.
Yes.
And we have no idea how that can happen. And so there's a term that I use in the TEDx talk called your abracadabra. We each have our own special abracadabra.
Yeah.
And so if you just spell the word magic, it's my abracadabra generates improbable connections, MAGIC. And so go out there and do it and see what happens in your life.
My abracadabra generates improbable connection. Awesome, awesome. So I'd love to dive in. People share a lot of success stories, and I know that you've had quite a number of them over your 25 plus years career journey. Can you share a moment that maybe a campaign missed the mark, or something that is not as successful as you expected, and then what did it teach you?
So I remember working at an agency, and we worked with hospitals, and they wanted a campaign to be able to recruit nurses to the hospital. And so we all met and we talked about this as as an agency, and we thought this was it. Like, this was going to change their ability to get the exact people that they needed. And so we presented that, and, we pulled out all the stops. We did everything that textbook says you should do in a presentation, and we came out of there and we felt it was awesome. Unfortunately, it landed like a brick. Now, that phrase, again, I don't know if it translates, but you can imagine, it just hit the floor and it was not received well at all. And we thought about it, and what we realized was the tone of that campaign did not fit the personality of that organization or the leadership in that organization. And so we were blinded by the idea, but we failed to match that idea with that client. We went back to the drawing board and we reframed the approach that fit within their culture and their personality. We ended up getting another client about a year later. And after we got that client and left that first meeting, we all looked at each other and went, wait a minute. That campaign that flopped, that's the exact campaign
that would work for
this organization needs.
Interesting.
And so we reconfigured, we polished it up, dusted it off. We took that back when they were opening a new hospital, and that became the most successful campaign that hospital organization has ever seen. We dropped their average cost per hire down to some ridiculously low amount. And all of a sudden we were like, okay, we were just ahead of our time and we had the wrong match. And so that was a story of failure that ended up turning out okay. But just be sure that the campaign matches the client and don't go in with your preconceived notions. So I always remember that one. It's a fun one to think about.
I agree, right? A lot of times it's not like one size fits all, right? We just need to like work with the brand, learn so much from them, and like adapt, make adjustment, and just create what is like unique for them based on their customers and their own personality. Insightful. Yes, you have shared how it became successful. But before we wrap up, also, is there any particular one work that you've done at your current agency that you're like super, super proud of that became really successful?
Yeah, so I think I can think of one exciting story. We work with a company that manufactures hard surfaces, stone and manufactured products that they create amazingly. I don't know how they do it, but for bathrooms and kitchens. So, everything from countertops to in luxury hotels to offices to expensive homes to homes like you and I have that, are great for gathering people around. They're durable. They look awesome. And so they were marketing based on materials, right? And so the features associated with what color the product was. Kids could be playing with their toys and it wouldn't scratch. And so we looked at that and we looked at their goals and we said, well, you're missing an opportunity here because really, like what you said earlier about Nike, it's how you make the person feel. And, I would say most homes around the world, the kitchen is typically the gathering place where happy times happen, right? We're having get-togethers with family. We're having friends over. We might have a dinner party. Good news is shared, maybe some bad news sometimes, but lots of memories happen around a kitchen. And so when we started to market in that mindset, their business changed. And I think, as business owners, we get too close to what we love about our products and services, and we start to talk about the features, and really it's the benefits. And we've heard this over and over and over and over, but it plays true. And so we shot some video and some film and really dug into all the amazing things that can happen around this company's product. And, the focus was no longer on the product. The focus was on the people who were using the product, but they could see themselves and they had aspirations to want to have that type of situation in their home. They wanted to be proud of their kitchen with this lovely environment. And so, yeah, I would say that's a great turnaround story. It's just fun to see things like that happen.
Well, interesting. That's like really beautiful. Yeah, changing the narrative and then like achieving results. So in wrapping up, I've got marketers, creators, even founders that will happen to listen to this episode. You've had more than 25 years working with founders, working with businesses. What will be your final words or practical tips you just want to leave them with? Yeah, for them to like take home from this particular episode.
I would say don't be afraid to get out there and show your voice online. We're in a very funny spot right now. And when businesses are relying, we talked about AI earlier, producing very generic and plain content. When the owner steps out from behind the logo, it makes a difference for the company and for the business to be able to get referrals because people know who it is. I have a recent article on Forbes that I wrote about that. It is shifting. If you can share your experience, your expertise, establish authority and trustworthiness, you're going to be way ahead of other businesses. So whatever fears you have, just know that those fears will be overshadowed by the success you will have if you step out and tell your story.
Well, beautiful. What a brilliant way to wrap up this episode. Thank you very much, Jimmy. It's been a very, very valuable and insightful conversation that we've had. Looking forward to bringing you back sometimes in the future.
Great. Well, thank you, Joshua. I had a great time. We'll come back anytime you'll have me.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much.